Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do a discussion about this discovery set that I recently got. It's by a brand called Xinú, and Xinú is a brand from Mexico, from Mexico City. The name is actually a word from an indigenous language in Mexico, from the Otomi language, and I believe it means smell or nose? Nose, I think. And I got this set pretty recently, but I'd heard about the house a couple years ago. It's sold here in the United States at Lucky Scent and a few other places, but I'd never gotten around to smelling them. So when I took a trip to Mexico City, I went to their boutique, which is really, really beautiful and worth visiting, even if you're not a perfume lover. And I ended up picking up this discovery set. And it wasn't cheap. It was about $100. And these fragrances are not cheap at all. I think a 50 ml bottle runs about 240 US dollars. But after some initial hesitancy, I bought it, and I'm really, really happy I did. I've really enjoyed trying these fragrances. I'm going to try to take you through each of them and give you my thoughts on the brand. So if you're interested to hear that, stick around. Okay, so I'm going to preface what I'm going to say about the brand by saying that I really, really like a lot of these fragrances, and I was impressed with all of them. But I'd hesitated to try this brand for a while because their website and their literature is all very slick and fancy, and it talks a lot about how it's a Mexican brand and it takes inspiration from the plants of Mexico and the botanical essences and the people of Mexico, etc., etc. But when you dig a little deeper, they offer no information about kind of their sourcing or even who the founders of the brand are. And I did a little bit more digging independently, and in some Spanish language interview that I read, the founder of the brand says that they're inspired by Mexican botanicals, but that none of the ingredients are sourced from Mexico, that they are all presumably Givaudan captive ingredients or Givaudan ingredients, because all of these are composed by one perfumer, Rodrigo Flores Rue, who is a perfumer out of New York for Givaudan. So I was a little bit turned off by that, and to some extent it feels like it's capitalizing on this place that has such a rich history and culture and is so underrepresented in perfumery, it feels like, or just kind of all of the Americas are underrepresented in perfumery. But that being said, the quality of the perfumes is very good, even if they're not sourced from local things, and I really enjoyed trying them. Okay, first up, I'm going to talk about aguamadera, which is the first one in the line, and they all come in these very cute dropper bottles that are 4.5 ml. And I know people might think that it would be cumbersome to use, but they're actually very nice to use. And they also come with these little cards that tell you about the fragrance with the notes, etc. And they only give a few notes for each of the fragrances. Sometimes on the website they give a few more. But here the fragrance is focused on agave, or the smell of the agave, and I'd say that's a pretty accurate representation. I thought this was going to be a citrus freshie, but in reality it's more like a blue fragrance, which normally I would hate. But this one is very well done. It starts off with a lime note, and I think the brand says there's like a saltiness. I don't get a ton of saltiness. As it dries down, it gets woodier, greener, also a little incensey. I think the Gaiac wood is doing a lot of the work here. It also gets a little bit creamy, a little bit smoky. Oh, it also has like a little, I don't know if I said this already, but like a kind of tequila boozy feel, very lightly. But it's definitely kind of like a nighttimey scent, I would say. Ah, to me, it feels nighttimey. I could also see for people who generally feel more masculine on their day-to-day basis that this could be like a great office or everyday signature kind of scent. But it's just really well done. It's very classy, and it smells very handsome is the word that I wrote on my review on base notes. It just smells really well put together. And the notes that they have here on the card, or the accords, the feeling, do kind of ring true. It is translucent, it's fresh, and very refined. So I liked that one. Okay, next up is Copala, and this one may end up being my favorite. I'm not quite sure yet, but I'm going to try to put on a couple drops so you guys can see how these look. See if we can get some focus. Probably not. No. There we go. But Kpala is based on the copal resin or capahu resin, which I guess is native to Mexico and has since been exported around the world. The notes here are pink pepper, copal resin, mesquite, and vanilla beans. This one is really super interesting, or maybe not interesting in that for a lot of people, I think, who have smelled a lot of resinous fragrances, they'll think it's sort of like not that special. For me, it was special because this feels like a resinous amber fragrance that is really well attuned to a warm climate, like where I live. It definitely has this smell that is sort of like liturgical or sacred about it. This fragrance, and a lot of these fragrances actually open up with a big blast of pink pepper. I think that's probably one of the signatures of the house. So it feels fresh and a little spicy. And as it dries down, you get this beautiful kind of ambery copal resin smell and a little bit of, I don't know that I would have identified it as like a mesquite wood smell, because that's something in America we think of as being like so associated with barbecue. But just like a rich, smoky, slightly scratchy, woody smell. They also list this as being kind of like their vanilla fragrance. But I honestly do not get much vanilla out of it at all. Not even like a benzoin-y kind of smell. It smells not sweet to me, but it's just really lovely. It smells, I think they've done a great job capturing on these cards what they smell like. It does smell mystic and intriguing, woody, and even endless is a great word to describe it. I liked it a lot. I don't know if it's full bottle worthy, and I'll get into that again at the later part of the video, but it is really beautiful. The next one is ummo, and this is the tobacco fragrance from the bunch. This was the one that I was probably looking forward to the least because I'm not a big tobacco person, although that's starting to change. But when I tried this, I ended up really liking it. It's different than many tobacco fragrances that I've tried. It again starts with a kind of aromatic opening. Here, I guess it's cited as juniper, but I could have been fooled if you said it was pink pepper. It's very sparkly. And then in the heart notes, it moves into the tobacco phase, and the tobacco starts to get very sweet. You know, you've got that classic brown tobacco, the kind of smell of like opening up a box of Marlboro Reds. But then in the heart notes here, there's a very thick, realistic honey note. And the honey to my nose is not like a Tom Ford honey that's like super sweet and sexy, but a honey note that is like when I smell honey, I think it smells sort of medicinal and dusty and maybe polleny, or kind of like you could imagine like the bristly part of a honeybee. That's what you get here. And only for a while. I was worried that it was going to get like ultra sweet and I was going to have to scrub it, but it stayed that way, that honey tobacco, for like an hour, and then it faded in the heart notes to something that was just a pleasant, woody, tobacco-y smell. They also list styrax here, and styrax being the resin from the liquid ambar tree, or in America it's called the sweet gum tree. And I was really kind of like taken back to a memory of when I was a little kid, and there were liquid ambar sweet gum trees in our neighborhood, and they drop these seed pods, which are spiky balls. And as a kid, I don't know what we called them, like gum balls or spike balls. But I remember the smell of like picking those up, and they're kind of, they don't smell like anything particular, but they smell kind of like dusty and slightly sweet. They smell like something that came from a tree. They smell like fall. And in the base, this perfume has a really nice kind of nostalgic brown autumnal feel, while at the same time not being like something that you couldn't wear in a warm climate. That's probably what I like most about all of these, is that they're all so well suited to the place where they're from, Mexico City, which actually has a very similar climate to Los Angeles. So they feel very appropriate to wear here. So I liked Ummo a lot. Okay, next up is Monstera. I think this is probably the most popular one from the brand. And I didn't think I was going to like it at first when I smelled it, but um, as I wore it more and more, I really liked it. And I think it's probably up there with Copala as being my favorite from the bunch. What does it smell like? It is an intensely green fragrance. I wrote a review on Base Notes where I said that Monstera reminds me of something like Balmain's Vent Vert or Chanel's Number 19. And it's kind of like those fragrances in that it's shockingly green, but it's hyper modernized, like for the TikTok generation. And so it feels very of the moment. When you first spray it on or put it on, it's got this beautiful, peppery, lush green fragrance, as if you had snapped a big, fleshy green stalk of a plant. It smells tropical and just very, very beautiful. It does not smell like a jungle per se, in that a jungle has soil, obviously, and like decaying leaves and animals and, water and, tepid water. I don't think a jungle actually smells as attractive as this smells. This smells more like a resort, like a Four Seasons resort, super fancy on the Mexican Riviera, where the like aesthetic of a jungle has kind of been repackaged and marketed to people who can afford to have very expensive vacations in a semi-tropical location. And that's not a dig against it. I really like the way this smells, but it's not a photorealistic jungle. And it stays fairly linear. I'd say the opening is very green and kind of bracing. In the heart notes, it becomes a little bit more floral, like a jasmine-y, a very nice jasmine that has like slight fruity notes at the, while always staying kind of green. And in the base, it remains sort of that same thing. It's like a Hedione green fragrance that I found to be very, very nice, very refreshing. Um, Not like anything that I have in my collection, and very, I would think, mass appealing. I think all of these have a fair bit of mass appeal about them. So definitely worth trying Monstera if that sounds interesting to you. Okay, and this last one is Oronardo. This is a tuberose-based fragrance, and I'd say that all the fragrances from Xinú are very, very unisex, with perhaps aguamadera leaning a touch masculine and Oronardo leaning just a touch feminine. This one in the opening gets, well, I guess in general this one gets compared to Frederick Mahl's Carnal Flower, but in the opening I definitely get the comparison to Carnal Flower. It opens with this very bright, peppery green tuberose. It's a little bit mentholated. The opening is absolutely stunning. In the heart notes, though, this fragrance kind of went south for me. The tuberose gets joined by a bunch of yellow floral notes. Here they say mock orange and marigold and oleander. I'm not really familiar with any of those flowers, or the way they smell at least. To me, it smells like there's like an added ylang or jasmine note. It goes a little tiny bit indolic on my skin, actually. It's very buttery, but in a way it smells kind of like overripe to me, or like even bordering on rancid. I think that this is just me, because this fragrance gets high praise from a lot of reviewers. But it just didn't work for me. I wore it to work one day this week, and by the time I got home, I was really ready to scrub it off. There's not like a woody base or a musky base. It kind of, at the heart notes, continues just to be this kind of mixed floral bouquet. without the green notes that were there in the opening. So I could see why people like it, but it just really wasn't for me. So, final thoughts on Xinú. I really, really enjoyed sampling this house. If you're on the market for a good discovery set, this is a great one to get. They're all very generously sized. They're all pretty unisex. I'd say also the performance on these fragrances is stellar. I've used each of these a lot, and you can barely tell. Just a couple of drops really goes a long way. As far as whether or not I'll be picking up full bottles of any of them, I really don't think I'd pick up a 50 ml of any of these. Again, they're quite expensive, but I've seen that recently they've come out with a 15 ml option, and I think those are around $100 each, which is still expensive for, a fragrance. But that's kind of my level of comfort these days, I guess. And it's not that I don't think that they're good enough to warrant a full bottle. Uh, I think at this point my collection's just gotten to the point where I know I'm not going to get through certain things. If I were ranking them, gosh, it'd be really hard. The first four are pretty close to each other. I'd probably put Kpala and Monstera right at the top, with ummo and aguamadera right next to each other in second place, and oronardo down in third. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Xinú. Let me know if you've tried the brand and what you think. What's your favorite? And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.